Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining. My name is Jennifer Gill. I'm the Director of Product Marketing at Zerto. And today we're going to talk about hot topics associated with VMworld 2013. So before we move into the webinar, I just wanted to go over a couple of other upcoming events we have. Because today we're just going to be discussing hot topics at VMworld, as I mentioned. So there won't be any product demo during the webinar. However, if you are interested in a product demo, we have a webinar on September 24th at 1 o'clock Eastern. And if you'd like to hear from one of our customers, on September 10th, we'll have a hear from your peers at 1 o'clock Eastern as well. And of course, we will be at VMworld, booth number 629. If you'd like to stop by, we would love to talk with you. So before I turn it over to Shannon, I'd like to introduce today's speakers, one of which is Shannon Snowden. He's a Senior Technical Marketing Architect at Zerto. He has many VMware certifications, including the VCP 12. He often presents at many VMUGs, other VMware-related events, and he did serve as a judge for Best of VMworld, and he has his own blog. And at Zerto, he develops and articulates the technical marketing message regarding our products. We also have Gene Perry, Director of Sales Engineering. He's had multiple administrative management positions in IT over the last 20 years. He's implemented, maintained, and managed IT infrastructure of varying size. And at Zerto, he leads the global SE team, working with customers and partners, helping implement leading BTER solutions. And then lastly, we have Jason Nolan, the Cloud Sales Manager at Zerto. He managed the product portfolio as a product manager from 2008 to 2012 at cloud service providers. He's a certified business continuity planner, and he's worked for cloud and other service providers for more than 15 years. And at Zerto, Jason is part of the cloud team working with cloud service providers, helping design, architect, and deliver PR services to our customers. So before I put it over to Shannon, one thing I just wanted to call your attention to is on the right-hand side of your screen, you should have a control panel, if you will, and in there, there is a questions panel. Please use that to ask questions, and Shannon will be asking me to see if you have any questions related to the topics that we're discussing. So please use that to ask questions throughout the webinar. Shannon?
Thanks, Jen. All right, so the agenda for today, what we wanted to look at was based off of just our industry knowledge and the sessions, registering for those, and other conversations that we've had. These are kind of four main topics that we've seen that are what we feel you'll see around VMworld. And if you recall, I guess it was last year, if you were at VMworld, VMware started talking about the software-defined data center. And in a lot of ways, what they were trying to do is quantify a little bit better what cloud meant, because everybody was talking about cloud this, cloud that, and it was very nebulous, I would say, as far as what it really meant. So VMware took the opportunity to try to make it more tangible with calling it the software-defined data center. And what they mean by that is getting everything virtualized, essentially. That includes storage and networking and all the other pieces that are sort of lag behind. So that's one topic we think you'll see a lot at VMworld. And then also hybrid clouds. And we hear about the sort of different names for different clouds. This one has popped up a little bit more lately, and we'll talk a bit about how that, how to look at those as you are at VMworld if you can go. And if you can't, there's still the what we hope you get out of this is the idea that software-defined data center and software-defined disaster recovery are very powerful ideas. The third topic we'll be talking about today is ensuring disaster recovery reliability. What we mean by that really is how much do you trust your DR plan and its effectiveness. And then the last topic that we'll be covering is the ideas around sort of blurred lines. what is VR and what is backup. And that's, I believe, is going to be an emerging topic that you'll see a lot more of, simply because of the capabilities such as what Zerto has to offer. So, Jen, if you change slides. Now, I think this is the only slide that you'll see, and we don't have many slides, by the way, that you'll see that actually tattoo Zerto everywhere. Because this really isn't so much about product as about options. And we have the distinct advantage of being a hypervisor-based solution, which is a lot like where the software-defined data center is wanting to be. So if you think of it in that perspective, what I wanted to do with this slide and what we talked about is just level setting everybody that's on the call that understands where we're coming from and understands the capability of why we think what we think. So if you look from all the way to the left there with the Zerto as a single enterprise or an office building, just a data center, Zerto gives that IT manager options to be a single vCenter deployment, and we can still give you a DR option. If you have both data centers with 2 vCenters and different equipment, repurposing old equipment, we can provide you a DR option as well. And then as you grow and get comfortable with it, you may look at multi-department enterprise clouds and also look at cloud service providers that happen to be running Zerto. So if you think of it in the way that virtualization gave you the freedom of that production workload mobility, we're just adding the protection element into it to where if we have VMware running at all of the locations from the data centers to the clouds, and you overlay Zerto on top of it, the same power of virtualization at a single data center, of being able to demotion and such, you're able to have that level of protection and mobility with those VMs. So that's kind of where we're approaching this from, having customers in production that get to experience software-defined disaster recovery. So, Jim, let's switch sides and get Jason and Jean involved here. Recently, Zerto did a survey. It's posted on our website, and the results of it were quite interesting. And so we looked at it from a challenges thing. So the first topic here is software-defined data center. What does that really mean for disaster recovery? So keeping in mind what Zerto offers, that's kind of the perspective we'll take. But we're going to divide that perspective out a little bit further with Jean and Jason's expertise. So Jean is going to be representing, because he works with it so much, the enterprise IT manager, that guy that's standing in the middle there. And Jason's going to look at it from his expertise level of disaster recovery from a cloud service provider. So, Jean, now that we're to this challenge of disaster recovery, you talk to a lot of IT managers that are either on the pre-sales and also the post-sales. So when you talk to them about their challenges, how does that match up with what we see as a result? And one note about the results: yes, the top 2 add up to more than 100% because we allowed you to choose multiple answers, because DR is a complex, there's not a one-answer deal. So, Jean, from your perspective, matching what your conversations with IT managers are on the enterprise, how does it match up with what the results show?
Yeah, thank you, Shannon. So, yeah, I was actually pleasantly surprised seeing this. I think, as we discussed earlier as well, that when I looked at this, the complexity and the difficult to manage is what I hear on a daily basis from the folks that I talk to within their organizations with their BC and DDR solutions. And I would have said somewhere in the range of about 70 to 75%, and seeing this at about almost 90%, around 86% for those 2 categories, was really surprising to me. In that I think it certainly bodes well and is fantastic for Zerto. The cost issue, I think, is always going to be there because everyone wants the biggest bang for their buck. But it definitely is a category where complexity and day-to-day management, operational efficiency is really just the overwhelming driver for looking at new and different solutions.
So when we talk about complexity, if we're approaching this from a software-defined data center, and you've had the the pleasure of being able to talk to the same managers in a post-sales role. So when you talk to them, how has software-defined disaster recovery, being all virtual and getting the hypervisor, getting the replication up in the hypervisor, how has that adjusted their cost and complexity, from a percentage-wise, as you talk to them in general terms? You didn't survey them on the number of answers and such, but what's the overall theme after they've adopted more of the software-defined disaster recovery position?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that the overwhelming feedback has definitely been that it's made their lives easier, and actually the additional conversations I have that to me validates that is that they talk to me more about how they can and how they are using additional features and capabilities within within our solution, right? Because they're simply managing less from a hypervisor perspective, right? In terms of all that infrastructure and more legacy type replication and BC solutions, but they're able to really focus more on actual application testing and failover and recovery. Right? So it's really allowing them to really take more full advantage of their virtualized application environment, and further to utilize additional advanced features that we can offer within that software stack.
So it kind of gets them out of the business of being such infrastructure focused because of the hardware dependencies, and then they start addressing that 33% of management and the 17% of non-application aware. That's really interesting. In fact, Jen and I were talking to one of our customers who had surprising feedback that they were looking at actually being able to do more with less administrators, not from getting rid of people, but they didn't think that they could address the footprint size of what they would have liked to have protected. So do you see that in the some other customers as well? We had one specifically telling us that, but do you get that feedback from customers as well?
Yeah, we do. I mean, for the first time, I've been doing BTER for quite a while, certainly with more of the array-based solutions in the past. And definitely it's opening up the options of flexibility for our customers and for the managers that I speak to day to day to really make more efficient use of their investment in their infrastructure, as well as new, cheaper, faster, better infrastructure as well, right? But not having to be locked into all the feature or function of a particular model or vendor.
Okay. So Jason, when you're looking at it from a different perspective, which is actually a cloud service provider perspective, when you look at the results of cost and complexity, now obviously if you could, as a provider, eliminate those pain points, that's a great thing. But I think a little more elementary to their problem, and I want to sort of position this correctly for you, Jason, is the complexity issue. I think is I want you to talk a little bit about how when we developed a service provider program, how it's just taken off the adoption with service providers, cloud service providers. The rate is incredible. And so if you could focus in on what are they seeing with software-defined disaster recovery that they didn't have before?
Sure. Thanks, Shannon. That's a good point. I think it's really interesting to see that the cost and complexity sort of twin towers, so to speak, because they really do go hand in hand, and that's a point that has been, commented on time after time in working with, a large number of service providers here at Zerto. There's service providers that have been doing cloud services for several years, so they're a lot more mature, and then there's other cloud service providers that are looking to expand into disaster recovery services as a new venture. And in both cases, they need to be very, very competitive from a cost standpoint in the marketplace. But the DR as a service as a whole is a very complex solution because they are looking to replicate an environment that they might not be managing themselves and replicate that into their environment. And in some cases, they have a vCloud infrastructure that they want to replicate a non-vCloud customer into. And so DR as a service is complex enough as it is, and the service providers that we're working with are tired of dealing with snapshots and managing those. They're tired of dealing with host-based software, and they're tired of dealing with physical restrictions. So, most commonly they're either dealing with array-based replication with SAN technologies, and any customers that they would like to onboard as a DR as a service customer must have identical equipment, so it's a long, drawn-out procurement process with a limited lifespan. And then if they're doing host-based replication, there's a lot of additional costs in software licensing because the VMs in the DR set are running. And there's a lot more effort to manage all these technologies. So with the hardware platforms, there's a lot of restrictions in the virtual environment. With the host-based software, they have to manage the guest OS and make sure that everything is maintained. You're basically maintaining a whole separate environment, in a duplicative effort. And so they're looking to simplify things. They realize that they have to simplify their DR services in order to scale properly and to be successful in the industry, because there's a constant pressure every day to have a lower price point and offer better services. So they're constantly being pressured to do more with less. Customers want to have better RPOs and RTOs, and they need to do it at a lower price point. And they're not able to achieve those goals.
So in essence, they may solve the problem for one customer, but that hardware solution really wasn't helping them with the next customer necessarily.
Right,
so,
and if they're dealing with a hardware-based solution, they're going to it requires the service provider to make a significant investment that would scale, and then they can only onboard customers that are willing to buy that identical hardware. If the customer has no need to buy any hardware or a budget for it, then that really narrows their market.
Right.
Versus a completely software-based solution, they can market to a very broad base of customers.
And really, we're talking cloud service provider, but that really reflects back to larger enterprises too. They have the exact same challenges. Maybe they've got data centers spread, all over the place, and they got different types of equipment that don't match. And so it definitely, drilling into this a little bit more, we can see from each perspective sort of a root cause of what's been the biggest challenges. And cost is just a byproduct of complexity, I think.
Absolutely. And just one, and to your point, service providers and companies alike, the customers alike, especially in today's day and age, they don't want to be beholden to one, hardware vendor. With the constant evolution of SSDs in the marketplace, tiered storage, people want to be more agile in the IT infrastructure, and they don't, having a completely virtualized environment should allow them to be more flexible. So to your point, they may have older equipment that they could repurpose for DR in the enterprise. For the service provider, they may want to have tiered storage that the customer may not want to invest in, and having a solution like Zerto makes it very easy for them to target all of those customers.
Sure. Okay, so Jen, if you want to switch us to the next topic, I think we've talked about that thoroughly. So let's look at the hybrid cloud, and so this one gets into a bit of everybody's talking about it, but not many's doing it maybe yet, because as we established early on, the reason why the VMware sort of repositioned the clouds themselves, the software-defined data centers, is that it was just too an intangible thing. So what we want to do is apply the filter once again of disaster recovery. So if you look at the perspective that Gene and Jason's talking about, as far as we're talking post-implementation of software-defined DR, of really just flipping a lot of the issues into the biggest challenges are being removed, and you're able to be much more flexible, and as the IT manager and as a service provider, just have all kinds of different options. One of the options that we see an evolution of, and this is starting to happen with early adopters more specifically and more tangible, to match up with that slide showing the IT manager looking at all the different options that, with a Zerto overlay on it, is the idea around, okay, it's running in my data center, and because they're VMDKs and they're virtualized, maybe I don't need to build another data center, or maybe I can start leveraging, part of the machine somewhere else. And so that was one of the questions in our study that really starts asking about if you consider the cloud for disaster recovery. And one of the things you'll see at VMworld is a lot around, I would call them point solutions. So you're going to see some solutions that do one piece of this overall puzzle pretty well. But if you look at all of it holistically, like we've tried to take the approach, then you start seeing some holes. And if we focus on hybrid clouds here on this topic for a second, if we look at the number of responses, it looks like, even though it's not been a necessarily realistic thing, that there's a fair amount, 32% are considering it, and 14% are considering a public, and some combination of public, private. So, the hybrid means just that. It could be going public, could be private, could be both, as we see in our establishment slide, with the flexibility. And then we also see some that have already been early adopters of it. Now, if we take, from a DR perspective, in a software-defined DR, Gene, as managers, that IT manager gets more comfortable running software-defined DR. Are you starting to hear from real people running, post-software-defined DR? Is hybrid cloud either internally, private or public? Are those options now starting to be discussed with the people that you've been talking to, the IT managers, Gene?
Oh, absolutely, no doubt about it. And I think I heard you mention, Shannon, refer back to one of the things that I kind of draw a direct line from this slide back to one of the earlier slides. Was really around the idea of, I think it's on the slide, as mobility or portability, right? And that's what when the conversation does come up, which it certainly does quite a bit, I think that's one of the most important facets that Zerto can offer, and that because that's what these managers are looking for, that I talk to day to day, is the capability to, and the flexibility, right? So whether it's for a new deployment of an application, or whether it's because they don't want to potentially expand if they have a DR site today, or that footprint, or whether they don't have the DR site at all, and exploring their DR and cloud strategy, being able to talk to that and bring that flexibility and mobility to the table, I think is really powerful for us. But absolutely, cloud strategies in that review are being talked about on a daily basis with almost everyone I talk to.
And I think it's really where the rubber meets the road, if you want to use a cliche, that a lot of people have been considering stuff, but until there's something realistic that makes sense and is actually solving business problems, that's where it gets interesting. And being able to have true options. You're talking to IT managers that aren't speculating about this. They already see that it's working in real life. They're using different equipment at different locations of their own, perhaps, different storage types, different server types. The commonality, of course, is that they're running a VMware hypervisor. But it's kind of interesting to see how, and I'm going to switch this to you, Jason, of how all of a sudden the options light bulb goes off over an IT manager's head to go, you know what, I could possibly build out my own cloud, or if I could find a cloud provider that's running the infrastructure I already need, you know, that's a cool thing too. So when in your conversations with cloud providers, Jason, and just the trends you're seeing and the level of interest in things, how does that play in as a cloud provider being able to offer services?
Yeah, so thanks, Shannon. There's a number of different types of service providers that, if anyone that's listening to the webinar that is a cloud provider could take a look in the mirror and say, you know, what type of cloud provider am I? There's a managed service provider that's really where, you know, cloud services have started before all of the automation had caught up, where the infrastructure, the failover, the environment was all managed by the cloud provider. And as the technology continues to evolve, that true infrastructure as a service, on-demand, self-provisioned ability has continued to mature. And so at different service provider levels, they are able to offer different services to their customers. And so as the enterprise starts to look at DR as a service in the hybrid model, there's a number of opportunities that really start to catch their attention. If they're looking for a fully managed service, they have the ability to extend their existing IT staff, which is typically overburdened with production requests as it is. So their staff is typically limited. And so with a hybrid model and a hosted disaster recovery as a service solution, those customers are able to extend their IT staff with a fully managed DR as a service and have the benefit of a team that is focused on disaster recovery 100% of the time. They're able to assist in the recovery of the application workloads during an emergency. And during a critical situation or disaster, the production team typically has to respond and react to the production environment to do assessments, to try to recover whatever they can and protect any equipment they can. And while that's all going on and they're reacting to a disaster, that IT staff has their hands full. The partner and the service provider is able to fully activate the DR site and start that process, and in most cases have the application set completely active and ready before the customer is actually able to get to a place or a point where they're able to actually resume business operations. So that's a huge benefit to the hybrid model. There's a few other things I think that also make a big difference. For the smaller customers that may not have multiple office locations, having a hybrid DR as a service solution allows them to achieve a certain amount of geographical diversity that they wouldn't necessarily be well, set up to support. So if all of their IT staff is in one area of the country and they're prone to hurricanes or they're in Tornado Alley, they're not going to want to have their data center within 1 hour of their production environment. So by leveraging the skill set and the ability of a managed service provider or a cloud customer can take advantage of being able to locate their DR services anywhere in the country that meet their needs.
Go ahead. That's a really powerful thing that you don't necessarily think about. I want to highlight is that it's not doing you a lot of good. if the staff is all in one location, and that location gets hit with a disaster. So it's a great idea to have a different location with people who are actually trained to do recovery. And I think that's a great point you bring out. That it's something that you don't necessarily think about on the surface. It's a very important point that cloud service providers are able to offer. And of course, large enterprises, they have that capability, with a spread out workforce potentially, but and data centers. But that's a great point.
Yeah, and I think just to further a little bit, to push the hybrid cloud a little bit further along too, there's two types of customers for cloud providers that are looking at hybrid disaster recovery services. There are those that have no experience, moving a workload into the cloud with a cloud service provider, and DR as a service is a great opportunity for them to test the waters and start to get more comfortable. And service providers recognize the power of that DR as a service as well, because it starts to pull them in, get them more comfortable with the cloud, and perhaps offer additional other services that could work well with those customers. But those other customers that are more mature and that are comfortable with the cloud, we're actually seeing a new trend, which is really exciting, is that there are customers that have a large investment in the physical infrastructure in their office, but they recognize that the cloud provider's data center is typically much better prepared and has a much higher likelihood of staying online. It has better infrastructure. So instead of using it as a DR target, they're migrating their production workload into the data center, and they're using the investment they already own in their office as replication targets. So in essence, they're doing reverse replication. And it's becoming more and more popular, but it's been very interesting to see how the hybrid model sort of plays out over time.
That is very interesting. It is a twist on the idea of hybrid. You always think of it going from you to a provider, but yeah, it's a very interesting. It makes a lot of sense. I mean, you've got service providers with tremendous data centers that are much more secure, operationally and functionally than maybe what your data center can offer. So that's a fantastic idea. I have another question on you mentioned managed services. So from a managed service provider, I have this theory that a lot of that was out of necessity, that the service provider or the large enterprise and the customer weren't really prepared for a Netflix experience. Would you say that's a fair statement?
Yeah, well, I think it's a fair statement, but I think that there are different types of customers out there. So up until recently, that most service providers did not have the tools or the technology available to them to offer anything more than a fully managed service. And now the more advanced service providers, there are a number of tools that they can use to offer a fully automated infrastructure on-demand, self-provisioned, agile environment. But it's fairly complex to do, and there's only certain providers that are able to really pull it off effectively. And likewise, the enterprise customers that are looking for infrastructure as a service, there are very few that have the skill set in their own internal IT staff and the bandwidth to really manage that type of an environment as well, because it is fairly complex, and there's a lot of intricacy that goes between managing all of the workloads that are in their production environment versus the workload that they're going to host, whether it's DR or production in an infrastructure as a service environment. And so I think managed services will be around, will always be there, and it's a way for service providers to offer unique value in the marketplace. But the infrastructure as a service, that demand is increasing constantly. So as service providers continue to mature and the customers continue to mature, that business will continue to grow as well.
Yeah, and I think that it in a lot of ways parallels the development of the management tool stack of the software-defined data center itself, because I know that we, with version 3.0 that is coming out, it's in release candidate now for Zerto, a lot of the features focus there was we have multi-tenant, multi-site, multi-data center capability for technically. We're now streamlining the management of all of that to get to the point where to those customers that you're talking about, Jason, that we desire more of a Netflix experience, that it's coming. The tools are getting there to enable that for a software-defined data center and also for DR. And that's why we're really excited at Zerto, because we are leading the charge on that management capability. All right, so Jen, if you want to go to the next topic, we'll hit it. I want to remind everyone, please type in any questions that you have into the questions window, and we'll try to cover those at the end or during the topic if we see any that are spot on to the topic at hand. So the next topic here is ensuring disaster recovery reliability. This one was an interesting result, I would say. Legacy DR solutions are not providing desired levels of protection. So when we talk about legacy, we're talking about all those reasons why there was 57 and 53%. The complexity, the cost associated with not being in a virtualized state for your disaster recovery. There's a lot of overhead that comes along with that. However, if we look at the results, up to 50% of the applications are considered business critical. So there's still a little Intel sprawl that tells me that if only 50% are critical. But nevertheless, there's still a lot of applications that are business critical running on virtual machines. Yet 77%, 3/4, are not confident their DR plan will work. That's amazing that it's pushed down to, here's what it is. It's an insurance policy. So DR is often looked at as an insurance policy. And a lot of organizations run as if they're 20 years old and feel like they're not going to have any problems health-wise. So they're just they're trying to ignore it. But the ones that have tried to approach it are not confident their DR plan will work. Jen and I did a webinar post-Sandy, and it was the tale of two different sort of DR positions. We had a managed service provider that had just started working with a new customer that when the business said, this is a disaster, we want to use our DR plan that's in place to fail over to another data center, the technical team said no. We would rather face a hurricane than to try to do a failover with the plan we have. So they were definitely in that 77% not confident that their DR plan would work. That was an amazing thing, and that was contrasted with, obviously it was a Zerto webinar, so we had the opposite side, because that's what we see daily, is we had a customer who had a planned failover. They were running a software-defined DR, said Zerto solution. It took them 30 minutes to fail over to somewhere, I think it was in Chicago or something, but they did a disaster avoidance, really nice and pretty. So they were very confident. They could tell you the RTOs on most of the recovery times for most of the servers in their plan. Now, if we look at over half the results there, the last two bullet points at the bottom, you're looking at they may test it once a year, and 18% have never tested it because they may not even have a disaster plan. So these are pretty amazing results when you start looking at, when you start breaking them down of what positions people have put themselves in simply because the solutions weren't there. So, Gene, if you would, with your conversations with IT managers, I would anticipate most of them are probably pre-sales where you're seeing these kind of results. So if you would just talk about, the conversations you have pre-sales and post-sales looking at the results of this study.
Yeah, so what's really interesting to me here, Shannon, is that, from a pre-sales perspective, certainly it's one of the most common objectives, concerns that I hear from customers in terms of what they're not able to perform or meet today in terms of their requirements, in terms of testing. It's still kind of surprising to me that many of the customers and folks that I talk to, right, are still their VR tests, when done, are really very scripted, if you will. Scripted in terms of they kind of know the results because they're really not indicative or realistic from what really would occur from an outage or an event type of perspective that would necessitate a recovery. Right? The other thing that I see as well is that one of the things that they're trying to look at as well, and actually this is kind of going back to that flexibility and portability issue and model, is that many of the folks are really looking for something other than a full DR site recovery scenario or method, because that scenario is typically going to be the one that has the least percentage of affecting most people, right, during their career, where it's really going to be more of the localized single application or a couple of applications that need to be recovered. From a post-sales perspective, it's really common for me actually to travel around and get with our customers as they're going through some of our DR tests, and really some of the most important feedback for me that I hear and see from them is the way that they're able to very easily test and make their whole process simply less complex and and more real, if you will, in terms of being able to have their end users actually log into their recovered applications, right, and do that actual testing that really helps mitigate the risk to their overall business.
Yeah, so I think that it's a good spot here too. You brought up that testing, and I think we should provide a little color around our perspective. So just as a sidebar for everyone that's not familiar with the Zerto solution, we have non-disruptive testing capabilities. So the story I just told about the customer knowing that it took 30 minutes to fail over their data center, they had done non-disruptive testing to their production environment often because it's so easy to do and it's non-impact to the production that they were able to determine those time frames. And so, Gene, when we talk about the increased confidence in testing, we're coming from that perspective. So I wanted to just add a little background to why we are so why we see such different results. So if you took a poll of Zerto customers and asked these questions, I think the results are dramatically different. Wouldn't you say, Gene?
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more, Shannon. And it's the other thing that I'd add here too is that we talk about our you mentioned our testing capabilities and recovery, and it's always interesting to me as well that while we're kind of making some of the distinction between pre and post sales, where certainly on the front end of the conversation we'll certainly talk with customers about the capabilities that they have within Zerto, right, that really can enable using that testing capability outside of the primary use scenario of recovering for a DR test, right? And on the as I talk to and visit current customers, as they increase their knowledge and their comfort level, as you mentioned with Zerto, once they've implemented, it's interesting to see the use increasing. And in some cases on a daily basis with different applications within their virtual environment, like using those test capabilities for whether it's everything from recovering a file, right, that may have been accidentally deleted or corrupted in some cases, right? But really expanding the use cases for the features and functions because of that ease of use and less complexity.
So from an IT standpoint, we're starting to see the effects of the non-disruptive testing with easily laid out workflows that sort of a software-defined DR gives you. Now, Jason, you hit on something on the hybrid that was tremendously important to as an enterprise IT manager and also as a cloud service provider, and that is the level of experience with testing. And so, Jason, if you would talk about, if you're, from a cloud service provider standpoint, looking at these results, if you're a cloud service provider, how do you go about changing the results to where that IT manager is not laying awake at night?
Yeah, the only answer to that is technology, right? And that technology hopefully is Zerto. I say that, half jokingly, but testing has been a thorn in service providers' side for the longest time. Anyone that's doing DR as a service knows that they need to test with their customers as often as possible. And the challenge there is it's a big pain, typically in the past, to do testing with other technologies. It's a very manual process, requires a lot of effort, a lot of coordination, a lot of scheduling, and a lot of project management to be done. In addition to that, getting the customer to want to pay for it is an entirely different issue. And the challenge for the service provider is if the customer doesn't test, it's very difficult to know whether or not there have been any changes made to that production environment that are going to impact the recovery of the VR solution. So it puts the cloud provider at risk when they're not doing regular testing with their customers, for legal and reputation damage. If a customer, God forbid, ever tries to activate their DR solution with a cloud provider and it doesn't work, that really is the black eye for the cloud provider. And it's a very small marketplace, and people tend to know very quickly. We all know that. And so there's a balance that needs to be struck there in terms of enabling a higher frequency of testing, but at a price point that customers can afford. Customers don't really want to pay for it. And so there's some really interesting things that we're seeing that are very exciting in the cloud provider space. If you're the type of person like me that gets excited about cloud provider technology, but that's a different story. What's happening is cloud providers that are taking advantage of the functionality within Zerto to automate testing, okay, they can actually extend to their customers the ability to test as often as they want. Because with Zerto, the testing does not impact the production environment. It does not impact replication, so there's no risk to the customer. So those two advantages make it easy to test because the testing is automated. So it's much simpler. It's a much lower cost. And what we're seeing is cloud providers are starting to increase the frequency that they're requiring or building into their package. So at a minimum, they're going to require a test once per year, and they may give the customer an option to test anytime they want. And the most advanced providers are giving them a consumption model. Say, hey, you can test every day if you want. We're going to charge you as you go in a based on the duration of your testing. And that sort of builds up along that consumption model of the infrastructure as a service provider. And then to take it one step further, cloud providers have been able to, the more advanced cloud providers that have felt the sting of sales recovery before, understand that with the automation that's built into Zerto, they're able to do something very, very innovative. They're actually able to script testing so that they've set goals to test instead of testing their customers only once per year or when they're ready, but they can test all of their customers once per quarter, with a scripted testing cycle. So I actually have one provider in the Northeast that actually has a goal of testing every customer every month. And the way they do it is they run a script. It brings the test environment online. It runs some tests against it and shuts it back down. In the morning, the IT group comes in, the DR team will come in at the cloud provider and review the reports, and they only have to manage that exception. So now they have more confidence that these customer environments are being tested every month or every quarter, unbeknownst or maybe known to these customers, and they're able to give them run reports. They're actually able to show them that and demonstrate that they did a test failover, even if it was for 15 minutes. They can show that the machines are online, and then they can reserve once a year to do, active testing, and more, maybe even the last failover on a slow weekend or holiday weekend type scenario.
Right. Now, following up on the testing, I think that it's critical to point out some very specific things to look at VMworld when you're looking at what Jason just described, which is the testing frequency, the level of confidence that is coming back. Something to look at is what's being tested, because if you look at more of a hardware-based, storage-based solution, they may be actually testing snapshots as opposed to the real data. There's a very important distinction between those two. Having worked with storage-based solutions doing snapshots and doing a DR test on a snapshot is not doing a DR test for production. You can get different results, and you should be aware that testing something that's not the actual production data is a false sense of security. So look at that at VMworld when you're looking at presentations or topics or vendors, and see if they're actually doing like what we value is making sure that we're testing the actual production data non-disruptively, but also being able to give end-user acceptance testing time, and we have an automated workflow to allow a customer, and Jason's standpoint or from Gene's standpoint, a department, give them an hour or 90 minutes to do validation testing, and if it's not good, or if it's they need to do some tweaks, we have workflows built in that will allow you to just fail it, roll it back, or to keep it. So there's a lot of complexity and a lot of nuances when you start talking about testing that can be misleading if you're not fully aware of all of the items at play there. And some great points with Jason on the frequency of testing and making sure that, if nothing else, audit requirements, but making sure that you have a product that can give you the correct results based off of testing actual data. So let's move on to the next slide, and then we're coming up near the end here, Jen. And so the last topic here is there's a perfect icon there. Being the thought leaders and being the technology leaders in the software-defined DR space, what we're really seeing is sort of a disruptive solution. And what I mean by that is, when is it DR and when is it backup? And when you start looking at capability that Zerto has, and I need to talk about Zerto again for a second, we would represent why we're clouding things up in a good way. When you have the capability to restore to any point in time, all the way back to 5 days. So now, Gene, as an IT manager, I now have a tool in place that gives me the capability to go back at any point in time 5 days. Do you find in talking to IT managers that ability, there's a certain percent of my servers that's good enough. I don't really need to look at a traditional backup solution. So, Gene, do you get that kind of feedback from IT managers?
Yeah, absolutely, Shannon. I really can't tell you how this, to me, is one of the most exciting slides in the presentation today, because it's something that I'm really excited about in terms of where the industry and where a lot of folks are looking and asking to really merge these two use cases and technologies. And it definitely comes up. Whether it's very commonly asked, is 5 days the maximum that you can very quickly recover to back using your history, and that folks would love to see more from a longer archive type perspective. But I think it's also exciting to me because I think from all the conversations I have, I think what's unique for Zerto and our solution is that there have been many solutions that have begun as more of a backup solution and really try to extend out into the BC data replication realm, and/or, like you mentioned earlier, with snapshots and more array-based technologies where they've been dedicated new infrastructure type solutions like BTER that have come about and re-replicating your data that a lot of customers have implemented. And they're really looking to simplify, which I think is really driving the convergence of this, both of those spheres. And I think what's really unique about Zerto is that we're kind of coming at it from the other side, where we've got the BC piece nailed and solid. And it's really more easily about getting back to software-defined technologies, really just being able to incorporate and add more of those capabilities to the recovery site, whether that be within the cloud or whether that be within the customer's own premises. So it's pretty exciting for me because I think. Yeah, go ahead, Shannon.
Yeah, and as you were saying, it's very exciting because we're just on the forefront of it emerging into something that's going to be somewhere in the middle. So, Jason, from your standpoint, from a CSP, I know they've had a bit more experience with trying to provide both services. What do you see as an opportunity for them as convergence matures?
So I think a cloud provider would love to have a technology that would do both for them, that they could manage with a single pane of glass. But I think everybody can pretty much agree that we're not there yet. The challenge there being is that DR services need to be on high performance storage, and data backups and offsite backup services are typically the exact opposite. So they're on high density, low performance storage, right? So the ability to separate those two and keep them in different, with different retention models beyond 5 days is the current challenge. One of the benefits that cloud providers love in the feedback that we're getting, regarding their Zerto services, is that they can use a lot of the backup services today that they're using for offsite backups and currently offering their customers alongside of Zerto. Because of the hypervisor-based replication technology, a lot of the I365, eVault, some of the other technologies that are out there for customers to white label, backup as a service, even Iron Mountain and Autonomy, which are some of the the largest backup service providers and white labeling services that are offered today. But all of those can work right alongside Zerto. And so for today, I think they're really excited because they see a DR as a service customer as an opportunity to upsell with backup services as well, and vice versa.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great time to be in the business, obviously, for if you're in the software-defined disaster recovery. I do want to, we're getting close on time here, so we just wanted to touch on this one because it's a new one, it's a new idea, and certainly making it such a unique position. So, Jen, if you want to go to the thank you slide, and we'll thank everyone for attending today. I'd like to thank Gene, Jason, and Jennifer for participating and doing the roundtable. I'd like to also thank all the attendees for sticking around, and hopefully you found this informative. I hope each of you get to go to VMworld. If not, go to the VMworld parties or emulate one, if nothing else. And thanks, everyone, and have a good day.